America is the most industrialized nation in history. But here's what nobody tells you in school. In 1800, the United States was a joke, a collection of farms, dirt roads, and about 5 million people who had just survived a revolution and had absolutely no idea what came next. England had the factories, England had the machines, England had a 50-year head start, and England had a law. It was illegal to export industrial blueprints, machinery, or even the workers who knew how to build them. They weren't going to share the future with anyone, especially not their rebellious ex-colonies. So how did America go from that to this? It starts with a man who did something that today we would call industrial espionage. And back then, they just called it survival. His name was Samuel Slater. He was a young English textile worker who had spent years inside the most advanced spinning mills in Britain. He knew exactly how every machine worked, every gear, every shaft, every mechanism, and he memorized it all. Then he got on a ship to America, disguised as a farmer, because if the British authorities knew what he was carrying in his head, he wouldn't be getting on that ship at all. In 1793 in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, he built America's first water-powered textile mill entirely from memory. The British called him a traitor. The Americans called him the father of the American Industrial Revolution. Same man, same act. Completely different story depending on which side of the Atlantic you were standing on. And that mill in Rhode Island? It didn't just make cloth. It made a blueprint for what America was about to become. America had something England didn't. Rivers. Everywhere. The Northeast was covered in fast-moving rivers, and fast-moving rivers meant one thing in the early 1800s: free power. By 1830, the city of Lowell, Massachusetts had turned the Merrimack River into the most productive manufacturing hub in the Western Hemisphere. They built an entire city around the factory, housing for workers, stores, churches, all owned by the mill. The workers were mostly young women from New England farms. They called them the Lowell Mill Girls. They worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week, and they still found time to start literary magazines and labor unions. But here's what Lowell really proved. You could take a natural resource, water, combine it with machinery and human labor, and turn it into an industrial empire. America had just learned the formula. Now all it needed was fuel. In 1829, a locomotive called the Rocket won a speed trial in England at 29 miles per hour. People watching from the side of the tracks reportedly screamed and fainted. 29 miles per hour. Let that sink in. For all of human history, the fastest anything had ever moved. A person was a galloping horse, maybe 25 miles per hour on a good day for a very short time. The steam engine didn't just change transportation. It shattered the human understanding of what was physically possible. America caught on fast. By 1840, the United States had more miles of railroad track than all of Europe combined. Think about that. A country that 10 years earlier had almost no infrastructure, suddenly leading the world in rail. And the railroad didn't just move people. It moved cotton, iron, coal, and grain. It connected the farms of the Midwest to the factories of the Northeast and the ports of the South. The railroad was the internet of the 19th century, and America had just gone online. By 1860, the North and the South weren't just divided over slavery. They were two completely different economies. The South was agricultural, cotton, tobacco, human labor. Wealthy landowners who had no interest in factories or railroads because the system they had was already making them very, very rich. The North was industrial. Factories, railroads, immigrants pouring in from Europe, ready to work for wages. When the Civil War started in 1861, the difference became a matter of survival. The North had 110,000 manufacturing establishments. The South had 18,000. The North produced 97% of the country's firearms, 96% of its railroad equipment, 94% of its iron. The South grew the cotton. The North made the guns. The outcome was almost mathematical. But here's what history books skip over. The Civil War didn't just end slavery. It turbocharged American industry. The federal government spent money on an industrial scale it had never attempted before. New factories opened. New supply chains were built. New organizational systems were invented to manage massive production. By 1865, America hadn't just won a war. It had built the industrial infrastructure to dominate the next century. After the Civil War, a new kind of American appeared. They weren't generals. They weren't politicians. They were businessmen, and they were playing a completely different game. Cornelius Vanderbilt looked at the railroads and said, "I'm going to own all of them." John D. Rockefeller looked at oil and said, "I'm going to control every barrel produced in America." Andrew Carnegie looked at steel and said, "I'm going to make it so cheap that nobody can compete with me." J.P. Morgan looked at all three of them and said, "I'm going to finance whoever wins." These men weren't just building businesses, they were building systems, vertical monopolies that controlled entire industries from raw material to finished product to customer. By 1890, Rockefeller's Standard Oil controlled 91% of American oil refining. 91% of an entire industry. One man. People called them robber barons. They called themselves pioneers. Same men, same act, same argument that's still happening today. If you want to understand what American industry looked like at its peak, you need to visit one city. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1890. The sky was orange, not at sunset, all the time. Day and night, the steel furnaces burned so hot and so constantly that the city glowed. Visitors said you could read a newspaper at midnight by the light of the blast furnaces. The air tasted like iron. The rivers ran strange colors. The men who worked the mills aged 10 years for every 5 they spent inside. And Pittsburgh was producing more steel than all of Great Britain. Carnegie's mills alone were turning out 3 million tons of steel per year, at a cost so low that British manufacturers simply couldn't compete. The Brooklyn Bridge, the Transcontinental Railroad, the first skyscrapers in Chicago. All of it was Pittsburgh steel. This was the age when America stopped copying Europe, and Europe started copying America. In 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T. It cost $850, still expensive, about $25,000 in today's money. Then Ford had an idea. What if instead of building one car at a time, you built the car in stages, and the car moved through the factory while workers stayed in one place, each doing one specific job over and over and over again? The moving assembly line. By 1925, Ford was producing a Model T every 24 seconds, and the price had dropped to $260. Working-class families who had never imagined owning a car were buying cars. But Ford did something else that nobody expected. In 1914, he raised the minimum wage at his factories to $5 a day, double the industry standard. His competitors thought he'd lost his mind. Ford said, "My workers need to be able to afford the cars they're building." Whether he was a visionary or a genius marketer depends on who you ask. But the result was undeniable. American workers started becoming American consumers. And that changed the entire economy. The 1920s. America had just won a world war. The economy was booming. Factories were running at full capacity. Electricity was transforming daily life. Refrigerators, washing machines, radios, vacuum cleaners. Things that had been science fiction in 1900 were sitting in middle-class kitchens by 1925. Consumer credit was invented. You didn't need to save up for something anymore. You could buy it now and pay later. The stock market was going up every single month. Businessmen were on the cover of magazines like rock stars. And everyone was absolutely certain that this was just the beginning. On October 29, 1929, the stock market lost 12% of its value in a single day. The party was over, and not in a slow down for a while kind of way. In a 1/4 of American workers will be unemployed within 3 years kind of way. The industrial machine that had run at full speed for 50 years had just hit a wall. When Franklin Roosevelt took office in 1933, unemployment was at 25%. Banks were closing. Factories were idle. Farmers were watching crops rot because nobody had money to buy them. Roosevelt's solution was radical. The federal government would become the biggest customer in the American economy. The New Deal built 78,000 bridges, 650,000 miles of roads, 125,000 public buildings, the Hoover Dam, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the rural electrification program that brought power to farms that had never had it. Critics called it socialism. Supporters called it survival. But here's what both sides missed at the time. The New Deal didn't just build infrastructure. It trained a generation of American workers in large-scale industrial organization. Men who built dams in the 1930s would build tanks in the 1940s. And the 1940s were coming fast. On December 7, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. 2 days later, Henry Ford got a government contract to build B-24 bombers. His answer to that contract is one of the most staggering industrial achievements in human history. Ford built a plant in Willow Run, Michigan, 1 mile long, a quarter-mile wide, the largest factory floor on Earth at the time. By 1944, that single plant was producing one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. One bomber every 63 minutes. At the same time, General Motors converted its entire automobile production to military vehicles overnight. Chrysler built tanks. Westinghouse built radar equipment. A corset manufacturer in Detroit started making grenade belts. Between 1941 and 1945, American industry produced 300,000 aircraft, 86,000 tanks, 8.5 million military trucks, and 2 million artillery pieces. The Axis powers never had a chance, not because America had better soldiers, because America had better factories. 1945 to 1960. This is the chapter that doesn't get enough attention. Every other major industrial power in the world, Germany, Japan, Britain, France, had been bombed, invaded, or exhausted by the war. America's factories were untouched, and 16 million soldiers came home and needed houses, cars, washing machines, refrigerators, televisions, and college degrees. The economy exploded. Between 1945 and 1960, the American middle class doubled in size. Suburbs appeared almost overnight. Levittown, New York, 17,000 homes built in 4 years using assembly line construction methods borrowed directly from Ford. The interstate highway system was approved in 1956, 41,000 miles of highway that reshaped where Americans lived, worked, and shopped. The American dream wasn't just a phrase in this era. It was a product, and the factory floor was running 24 hours a day to manufacture it. Nobody saw it coming. Or rather, nobody wanted to see it coming. In the 1970s, the industries that had made America great started to crack. Japan had rebuilt its manufacturing sector from scratch after the war, adopting quality control methods, ironically developed by an American statistician named W. Edwards Deming, that American manufacturers had ignored. Japanese steel was cheaper. Japanese cars were more fuel efficient. Japanese electronics were more reliable. Then came the oil crisis of 1973. Fuel prices quadrupled overnight. Americans who had spent 20 years buying enormous gas-powered cars suddenly couldn't afford to drive them. Detroit didn't have a small car ready. Japan did. By 1980, the great industrial cities of the Midwest, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland, Gary, Youngstown, were hollowing out. The steel mills closed, the auto plants shrank, the jobs disappeared. They called it the Rust Belt. An entire generation of American workers had done everything right, worked hard, stayed loyal, built great things, and found themselves standing in an empty factory wondering what had happened. While the Rust Belt was rusting, something strange was happening in a valley south of San Francisco. Engineers from Stanford, garage workshops, companies with names that sounded like they were invented by children. Apple, Intel, Oracle, Cisco. They weren't making steel or cars or refrigerators. They were making chips, software, networks, and at first, almost nobody in Washington or Wall Street took them seriously. By 1990, the personal computer was in 20 million American homes. By 2000, the internet had connected them all. By 2010, a device in your pocket had more computing power than the computers NASA used to land men on the moon. America hadn't deindustrialized. It had re-industrialized around a completely new product. Not iron, not steel, not rubber. Information. The factory floor was now a server farm in a desert in Arizona. The assembly line was now a software update pushed to 1 billion devices simultaneously. America had invented a new kind of industrial revolution, and once again, the rest of the world was racing to catch up. Here's where we are today. The United States is still the second largest manufacturer in the world behind China, a country with 4 times the population. The factories didn't disappear, they got automated. 1 worker with a robotic system today produces what 10 workers produced in 1970. Electric vehicles are bringing manufacturing back to states that lost it decades ago. Semiconductor fabrication plants, chips, are being built on American soil for the first time in a generation because the pandemic taught a very expensive lesson about what happens when your supply chain is 8,000 miles away. Artificial intelligence is doing to white-collar work what the assembly line did to blue-collar work, and nobody is quite sure yet what that means for the next 30 years. But here's what 225 years of American industrial history actually tells us. Every single time this country faced a transition, from farms to factories, from steam to electricity, from manufacturing to information, people said it was the end. Every single time it wasn't. It was just the next floor of the factory. The question isn't whether America will reinvent itself again. The question is what it builds next. And that part hasn't been written yet. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment and subscribe. It means more than you know. And when you're ready, the next video is right here, waiting for you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention today. See you next time.